I used to think that if I stayed quiet long enough, someone would eventually ask what I thought. The chairs were arranged in a half circle when I walked in, the kind people use for seminars or support groups. Folded metal legs scuffed at the bottom. A piece of masking tape stuck on the back of each, marked in blue Sharpie: Darren, Colleen, Sophie, Eli. My name wasn't on any of them. I stood for a moment too long, unsure whether I should sit or keep holding the envelope I'd brought with the old floor plans. Darren glanced up from a stack of glossy printouts. His pen was tapping, methodical. The clock behind him ticked louder than it should have. We already went through most of it. He didn't lift his eyes from the paper. Should be straightforward. I nodded, even though nothing was straightforward about someone else renovating the home that bore my name on every legal line. Colleen shifted in her seat, arms crossed. I thought you told her we started. I looked at her, but her eyes stayed fixed on a loose thread at the hem of her sweater. There was a chipped mug beside her, probably the one I brought back from that trip to New Mexico, the one with the faded turquoise rim. I'd once told her she could keep it. Now it looked like she had forgotten it ever came from me. On the coffee table sat a sketch of the living room walls, pushed out window seats, added the old fireplace, erased. I didn't know we were finalizing today. My voice was lower than I expected. I was suddenly aware of the stain on my cuff from this morning's coffee, the one I hadn't noticed while washing dishes. Darren sighed and finally looked up, not angry, just bored. Mom, this is exactly what I meant when I said you make things complicated. That sentence didn't land in a burst. It sank. I sat on the nearest chair, unclaimed and cold. There was a small crack on the seat. I ran my thumb over it. Colleen reached for the papers. We had to move quickly. The contractor's schedule is tight. You'll still be living there. Nothing changes for you. Except everything had. Darren was flipping to a page with banking details. Look, the funding's already approved. It's better this way. Streamlined. The envelope on my lap remained unopened. I had wanted to show him how Howard and I had originally designed the back patio to catch morning light in April. It had never been built. He wouldn't know. He turned to me again. If you really want to give me something, the most helpful thing would be to step away. Let us manage it. Honestly, the best gift you could give is to disappear from this part of my life. The Sharpie writing on the chairs blurred. My hands had gone still. I don't remember breathing. He was still talking, but the words began floating somewhere above us, dry, logistical, mechanical. I looked down at my ring. I don't wear it often now. Arthritis makes the band tight, but that day I had slipped it on before leaving. I thought maybe it would anchor something. It didn't. No one said anything else to me. Colleen got up and started gathering plates in the kitchen. Sophie and Eli were in another room. I hadn't heard them come in. A dog barked next door. The faucet squealed faintly. I set the envelope down on the edge of the table. It slid a little on the laminate. I won't interfere, I said to no one in particular. No one stopped me when I stood up. I waited a beat by the doorway. Fingers grazing the coat hook Darren had installed last winter. It was still loose. I'd meant to fix it. Maybe he would now. I walked to the door. On the way out, I noticed they'd moved the portrait from the hallway wall. The one of Howard holding baby Sophie taken under the elm tree. The hook was still there, naked with a faint outline in the paint where the frame used to be. At home, the kitchen smelled of boiled onions. I hadn't emptied the trash yet. My coat slid off the back of the chair and landed with a soft thud. I didn't pick it up. I made tea but didn't drink it. The bag sat in the cup too long, the water turned dark and bitter. I left it on the counter next to the envelope I hadn't given them. I opened it anyway, just to see. Inside were the diagrams I'd drawn with Howard notes in the margins about window placement, where to put the herb pots. There was a line in his handwriting. South wall needs more light come January. It had smudged slightly, the ink bleeding at the edge where time had seeped in. I ran my finger over that line. Outside the neighborhood, children were riding bikes. The same laughter, the same rhythm of wheels over pavement. Everything unchanged except I wasn't standing at the window like I used to watching Darren ride his red bicycle down the hill while I folded towels. I stayed seated at the table long after the tea went cold. The silence didn't feel sharp. It felt settled. He had said disappear. I didn't cry. I folded the floor plans carefully and slid them back into the envelope. My hand lingered over the seal, but I didn't press it shut. Not yet. I simply sat still, staring at my hands, how the veins had risen with age, how the skin folded like parchment. They had done so many things, those hands. They had opened lunch boxes, wrapped presents in the dark, carried heavy baskets of damp laundry from the basement, turned the knob of his childhood bedroom door 100 quiet times just to check he was breathing. And now they rested, open, unclenched. There was nothing left to hold. Or maybe nothing left to offer that would be taken as a gift. I stayed there, letting the clock tick. And when it struck the hour, I didn't move. I simply listened. People rarely notice when a light bulb goes out during the day. The guest room had no closet, only a set of shelves built into the wall. I folded my winter coat twice before tucking it behind the spare linens. The closet in the master bedroom had always been mine, but Colleen's dresses needed more space, and there wasn't any discussion. I moved my things quietly after breakfast one morning. No one mentioned it, and I didn't ask if the arrangement was temporary. I brought the iron bed frame from the basement. The mattress sagged in the middle, and the left leg creaked if I turned too quickly in my sleep. Still, it was mine. I placed a small lamp on the side table and clipped a photo of Sophie in a cardboard frame to the drawer handle. I found it one day, tucked into the junk drawer under expired coupons. Colleen had once left a stack of folded towels outside my door with a note. Use these for now. The others are looking worn. I ran my hand along the edge of one. The tag still read, Target, printed faintly in lowercase letters. I gave up the evening English classes at the library without telling anyone. It became too difficult to leave the house by 5, especially with Eli's piano lessons and Sophie's tutoring. Colleen worked late most days. Darren had calls. I had a calendar taped to the fridge, each block filled with small notations in my handwriting. S, Sophie's pickup. E equals Eli's snack. V, Ichki's vet reminder. I never needed reminders for myself. At dinner, I still sat at the far end of the table. Not because it was assigned, but because the space between us felt best maintained at that length. Darren liked grilled chicken with lemon. I cooked it every Tuesday. Sometimes he'd nod while chewing, not quite praise, not quite silence. Sophie asked once why the chicken always tasted dry. No one corrected her. There was a voice in my head for a long time that sounded like my mother's. You make it too easy for people to step on you, she had once said, not unkindly, folding laundry on the porch steps. One day you'll disappear without even noticing. Colleen missed my birthday that first year they moved in. The day passed with errands, school pickups, the usual noise. That night I found a slice of store-bought cheesecake in the fridge with a label from the grocery deli, no card, no candle. I didn't eat it. It stayed there for 2 days and then it was gone. Darren saw me clearing dishes after Sunday lunch the next week. You know, he said, you're too sensitive about things like dates. That stuff's not important anymore. He didn't mean it cruelly. It was just something said between loading forks into the dishwasher and checking a text. But it sat with me longer than it should have. Not the words exactly, just the tone, the assumption that what mattered to me was irrelevant now, like shelf space or towels. I didn't bring it up again. There were always other things to focus on. One afternoon, I found a list scribbled in Sophie's handwriting on the kitchen notepad stuff for Grandma's room. Throw blanket diffuser curtain that's not so ugly. I folded the paper and tucked it into my pocket. I washed the curtains that day and rehung them just the same. Colleen came home early once while I was vacuuming. She leaned in the doorway and tapped the broom with her shoe. "You don't have to do all this." "Really?" "I said it helped me sleep." That wasn't true. I hadn't been sleeping much. The hallway light outside my door flickered at night, and I never asked them to fix it. There were small things, always. Darren using my favorite mug for his protein shake and forgetting it in his car. Eli drawing a picture of the family for school, 4 stick figures, no gray hair. Sophie skipping past me with her headphones in the way teenagers do. Colleen rearranging the living room and asking if I wouldn't mind putting those embroidered cushions somewhere else. I kept the cushions in a bin under the guest bed. I touched them sometimes without taking them out. A neighbor once saw me pulling weeds from the flower bed and asked how it felt to have a full house again. I smiled. Told her it was good to hear laughter in the walls. That wasn't a lie. I had said it many times before, and each time the truth of it stretched thinner. Darren's voice had changed over the years. Not the sound, but the shape of it. Shorter. Flatter. Like a door that no longer fit the frame but still managed to close. There was a moment maybe a year into their living with me when I came downstairs in a blouse I hadn't worn in years. Pale blue with small pearl buttons. I liked how it sat on my shoulders even if the sleeves were tighter now. Sophie glanced up from her cereal and said, "Grandma, are you going somewhere I wasn't? I just wanted to wear something nice." That night, I folded the blouse and placed it in a donation box in the garage. It's probably hanging in someone else's closet now. I don't remember the last time Darren asked me how I was sleeping or whether the guest room got too cold at night. But I do remember wiping the inside of the fridge one afternoon and finding a small magnet that had once held Eli's kindergarten drawings. I stuck it to the side of the washer in the laundry room. It's still there. Crooked. A little faded. But holding on. Some days I wondered if I had confused silence with peace. I thought I was giving them space. I thought that was what love looked like. But the cushions stayed under the bed. The blue blouse never returned. And the calendar on the fridge kept filling with initials that weren't mine. I sat once on the back porch, cup of tea in hand, and realized I couldn't remember the last time someone had called me just to talk. Not to schedule, not to ask, just to talk. I didn't cry. I didn't write it down. I just let the tea go cold and the porch boards creak under me. And I said nothing. Sometimes people forget you're in the room even while you're still speaking. The new photo frame appeared one morning in the hallway near the thermostat. I wasn't asked about the placement, though it replaced the older frame I'd hung there years ago. The new one was wider oak-colored with cursive script, etched into the bottom, "Our Family." Inside were 5 smiling faces. Darren in a navy sweater, Colleen with her hair down, Sophie and Eli holding the dog I didn't know they'd gotten. The picture looked professional. Coordinated outfits, a beach backdrop. I stood in front of it longer than I meant to, one hand on the edge of the molding. My own face wasn't there. The hook that once held Howard's graduation portrait had been shifted slightly to fit the new frame. The tiny hole from the old nail still showed like a freckle out of place. No one mentioned the photo. No one said it was new. It was simply there, and I was not. Later that week, a padded envelope came in the mail from the senior center, my certificate for volunteer recognition. I hadn't expected anything, but someone had submitted my name for the hours spent helping with writing workshops. It came with a blue ribbon and a short letter typed in size 12 font. Darren came in as I was opening it. He dropped his keys onto the tray near the door and glanced at the paper in my hand. Nice. That's cute. He walked off before I could respond. A minute later, my phone buzzed. A message from him, a single clapping emoji. That was all. I slipped the certificate into the drawer beside the phone charger under a stack of unpaid magazine subscriptions and an old grocery list written in my handwriting. Turmeric baking soda. Elbow. Macaroni AA batteries. That night, I folded laundry in the small room I now slept in. A pair of Eli's socks had gotten mixed in with my shirts. I smoothed them out anyway, then left them on the stairs where he would find them. I once told Sophie a story about how Darren used to climb onto the kitchen counter to reach the cereal box with the puzzles on the back. She had barely looked up from her tablet. That was before Wi-Fi, right? I laughed a little and nodded. Darren passed by the doorway. She doesn't need to hear about ration cards, Mom. It wasn't ration cards I was talking about. It was the summer we painted the kitchen lemon yellow, and Darren tracked red footprints across the floor because he forgot to take off his new shoes. I didn't explain. I folded the dish towel in my lap and listened to Sophie's fingernails tapping the screen. There's a box under my bed I never open unless the house is empty. It's dented in the corners, held together by a belt loop from one of Howard's old work pants. Inside are things no one asks about: a lock of Darren's baby hair tied with green thread, a class photo from second grade where he wore his shirt backward and smiled like he knew a secret, the Mother's Day card he made in fourth grade with the word loyal misspelled in crayon. The handwriting was loopy, all uneven curves. I used to think it looked like a wave that never reached shore. I once brought that box out when Darren was helping clear the attic. I showed him the card and held it open for a second too long. He shrugged. I can't believe you kept that junk. I don't even remember writing it. He wasn't being cruel, just honest. I placed the card back in the box and wrapped it again in the cloth I had always used, a faded pillowcase with sunflowers that no longer held their yellow. During a dinner last spring, someone from Darren's office came over with his wife and brought a dessert from a bakery uptown. We sat at the long table Colleen had bought from a catalog. Modern, sleek, no tablecloth. I made coffee after the meal the way I always had and set out the ceramic mugs from the set I'd owned since 1983. Beige with tiny painted leaves. The guest took one look at the mug and smiled. These are so vintage. I didn't know people still had these. Colleen laughed. We've been meaning to replace those. Just haven't gotten around to it. I poured the coffee anyway. Later, when I was rinsing the cups alone, one of the mugs slipped from my hands. It didn't break, just chipped slightly at the base. I ran my thumb over the crack. It felt like the edge of a sentence that had been cut off. The next day, a new set of mugs appeared on the shelf. All glass, all identical. I kept one of the old ones in my room. Just one. Sophie had a school project a few months ago, a family tree. She showed it to Colleen before pinning it to the refrigerator. I looked at it quietly the next morning. The branches had names in neat black ink: Darren, Colleen, the children. One of the boxes beneath the top branch was blank. When I pointed it out, Colleen said she got tired and didn't want to fill in everyone. It's not personal. I hadn't said anything. That week, I stopped buying Sophie's favorite cereal. I started keeping instant oatmeal packets in a drawer next to my tea bags. Darren once told me years ago that I gave too much room to things that didn't matter. He had just moved back from college. The kitchen had a leak, and I was using a mixing bowl to catch the drips. He shook his head, looked at the bowl, and muttered something about clinging to useless fixes. But the bowl had caught the water just fine. That thought comes back sometimes. Small, harmless, Like static from an old radio station you didn't mean to tune in. There's a photograph in the living room from Howard's retirement party. I'm sitting beside him holding a glass of ginger ale. Darren is in the background grinning. Someone used to joke that he looked like he was about to bolt for freedom. I found that photo in a drawer last week face down under an old set of instruction manuals. The glass in the frame was dusty. I didn't clean it. I just placed it back where I found it. There are pictures now I'm not in. Stories I can't finish telling. Pieces of my life that sit in the room unnoticed like a dish drying too long by the sink. I still remember the weight of Darren's baby carrier in my left arm, the feel of his breath when he fell asleep in the back seat, the way his shoes used to squeak on linoleum. Now the floor doesn't echo when I walk, and no one notices. There's a kind of silence that settles in just before the moment something unspoken becomes undeniable. The envelope was cream-colored, not unusual, addressed to me in printed block letters. I opened it with the same knife I used for letters from the library. Electric bills, birthday coupons. No one ever redeemed. This one was different. The return address read First River Bank, but the language inside was more foreign than the letterhead. Words like transference of authority, signatory reassignment, and pending account review blurred into each other. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter beside my teacup. The mug had a faint chip along the rim I hadn't bothered to smooth. I reread the paragraph about ownership. Then I opened the drawer where I kept old documents, slid out the property deed, and placed it next to the letter. The names didn't match. I waited until the dishwasher finished its last slow cycle, then walked to the hallway where my cardigan hung beside Sophie's backpack. I reached for the car keys out of habit, then paused. The photo of Darren and Colleen had been updated again, now framed in gold with a faint inscription, "Built together." The bank employee didn't smile. She asked for my ID, printed some pages, and tapped a highlighter twice against a line I hadn't signed. The signature was mine, but the ink was too uniform, too crisp, a reproduction. I drove home without the radio on. The glove box rattled each time I hit a bump. I kept my left hand steady on the wheel and touched the dashboard with my right, as though anchoring something. Colleen was folding laundry when I walked in. The dryer buzzed behind her. She didn't look up. There was a deadline. Her voice came flat, as if from another room. Darren said it had to be done fast. It's just procedural. I placed the envelope from the bank on the counter. She didn't touch it. I thought you knew. I thought he told you. I didn't respond. She reached for a pair of Darren's slacks and shook them once before folding. I laid the deed next to the envelope. She still didn't look. It's only temporary, she added. We needed to secure the renovation funds. That night I found Darren sitting at the dining table typing into his laptop. I stood quietly by the door. He didn't glance up. I went to the bank. I said, though, the words landed with no weight. He clicked once more, then closed the lid. There was no other way to get it approved. You wouldn't have understood all the legal stuff. I pulled the chair out slowly. The legs scraped the floor in protest. I didn't sit. My name, I said, was removed. He leaned back in the chair and folded his arms. You still live here. No one's kicking you out. It's just paperwork. I waited. He didn't fill the silence. So I'm a guest now. He reached for his glass of water and took a sip. No answer. I turned to leave. Before I reached the stairs, he added without looking, the house needs to evolve. You had your time with it. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened the bottom drawer where I kept tax returns and warranty slips. At the very back was a photograph of Howard painting the fence. Darren had been 6 barefoot, standing with a brush and a face full of focus. I had taken that picture from the porch with a disposable camera. There was a blur in the corner from my thumb. The frame had been chipped since the last move. I never got around to replacing it. I set it on the nightstand and turned it slightly so it faced the wall. In the morning, a small white sign had been staked into the front yard. I found it as I stepped outside to collect the paper. The metal legs had already sunk into the ground. The sign read, Project Home Renewal, Whitaker Family Development. No mention of me. The garbage bins had been moved to make room for contractors. The azaleas along the walkway were trimmed down the clippings, left in a pile like forgotten confetti. Inside, Colleen was on the phone. Her voice was low, brisk. Demolition next week. Darren said he'll finalize the payment. I walked past her without speaking. Her eyes flicked up, then back down. In the pantry, I noticed the shelf labels had been rewritten in new handwriting. Snacks, pasta spices. Mine had been in cursive, written in black ink on masking tape. These were printed neat in a different voice. I reached for a box of saltines and realized it was now on the bottom shelf. I had always kept it at eye level. That afternoon, I sat at the dining table alone. The tablecloth had been removed weeks ago. Just wood now polished to a shine I never cared for. I placed my hands flat on the surface. The grain ran diagonally. The sunlight caught on a scratch I didn't remember. A noise outside made me turn. Sophie and Eli were playing catch in the yard. They had drawn chalk lines across the driveway, dividing the space into zones. I watched as Sophie ran her arms wide, then tripped slightly and laughed. I didn't go out. Instead, I opened the drawer again and held the envelope from the bank one more time. The paper was warm from the sun that had crept across the table. I turned it over and read the name at the top. It wasn't mine. Not anymore. And the silence that came after that was not the kind that asks to be filled. It was the kind that settles. Quiet. Final. Like dust on a photograph that no one picks up anymore. Some exits don't need noise to be final. The suitcase I used wasn't one of the newer ones with wheels. It was the soft kind, the one with a frayed handle and a broken zipper that always stuck halfway around the corner. I found it in the back of the hallway closet behind boxes marked with seasons that no longer applied to me. I didn't pack much. A cardigan, 2 blouses I could fold without wrinkling a pair of shoes I'd kept in their original box, still smelling faintly of cardboard and time. I left the jewelry case untouched. There wasn't anything in it worth arguing over. The basement wasn't finished, but it was dry. Colleen had used it once to store out-of-season clothes and toys the children had outgrown. I moved the bins to one side and laid the cot across from the water heater. The floor was bare concrete. I placed a folded towel underneath the cot legs so they wouldn't scrape. I didn't tell anyone. That evening, Darren passed by the basement door and paused. His voice dropped lower than usual. Whatever this is, don't make it dramatic. I didn't answer. He walked away before I could. The next morning, I opened the old notebook I used to keep recipes in. The pages had yellowed, but the pen marks held. I turned to the last blank page and wrote, not in a rush, not as a confession, just the sentence that had begun forming in my head days before. If I am an intrusion, I will remove myself without sound. I closed the notebook and tucked it into the side pocket of the suitcase. Claire Middleton still worked from the same second-floor office above the insurance agency. Her hair had turned silver at the temples since I last saw her. She wore a charcoal blouse and square earrings. Her desk was tidy, except for a mug with a chip near the rim. The chip matched the one on my kitchen cup. I stared at it too long before speaking. I'm not angry, I told her. She didn't respond right away. She leaned back, laced her fingers together. I just want to understand, I continued. If anything can be undone. She reached for a folder, opened it slowly, and removed her glasses with one hand. Do you want to contest the transfer? I want to know what still belongs to me. There was a pause before she replied. I can help. She didn't ask why I hadn't come sooner. She didn't mention Darren by name. She didn't need to. On the way home, I stopped by the post office and bought a small bundle of envelopes. I labeled them with names I hadn't written in a while. Margaret Langley Cynthia from Ohio, the name of the church secretary who used to send me calendar reminders. I didn't write anything yet. I just wanted to see the names in my handwriting again. That night I returned to the basement and sat on the cot with a flashlight. The bulbs overhead were too harsh. The light from the flashlight felt softer, like something remembered rather than seen. Above me, footsteps moved back and forth, thicker ones from Darren, quicker ones from Colleen. A cupboard closed, a drawer slid open. I heard laughter, then silence. Then the television humming through the floor like a distant train. The next day, Sophie found me near the laundry room folding a blanket. Are you sleeping down here now? I looked at her not directly, just enough to register the question. I needed more quiet. She hesitated, then shrugged. I guess it's cooler down here. She didn't wait for a response. Her footsteps were light, but they still left a trace. Colleen never asked. Darren never checked. A few nights later, I overheard a conversation through the vents. Colleen was speaking, but I couldn't make out the words, only the rhythm fast, then slower, then a pause long enough to mean disagreement. Darren's voice came next, clipped and short. I didn't ask her to move down there. She chose to. That settled it. I placed the notebooks, the envelopes, and a copy of the property deed Claire had mailed to me into a small lockbox I found at a thrift store years ago. The combination was faded on the sticker inside the lid. I memorized it anyway. The calendar on the refrigerator upstairs still held appointments, school notes, and reminders written in Colleen's handwriting. I didn't erase anything. I didn't add anything. A neighbor knocked one morning and asked if I was available to help organize a church rummage sale. I told her I wasn't sure of my schedule. She tilted her head. You used to have a steady rhythm, she said. I'm trying a different pace. She nodded. Her eyes lingered a little too long. Later, I sat on the basement cot and thought about Howard's old watch, the one that stopped ticking years before he died, but that he still wore every Sunday out of habit. I found it once in a drawer after the funeral. It still smelled faintly of him leather and cedar. I hadn't worn it, but I hadn't thrown it away either. There's a kind of watch that doesn't need to run to tell time. It simply reminds you that time happened. That night, I stood at the top of the basement stairs and looked at the hallway light. I turned it off myself. Then I walked back down step by step and closed the door behind me. It didn't make a sound. And I didn't need it to. Freedom, I've learned, doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives like a misplaced spoon, suddenly visible once you stop looking for it. The studio had one window painted shut with a sill warped just enough to keep the air from sealing out the street noise. I didn't mind. The blinds were crooked, and the wall near the fridge had a faint water stain shaped like a sideways feather. I ran my hand over it the first night. The paint flaked slightly like sunburned skin. No one asked where I had gone. No one followed. The silence this time didn't wait to be filled. The lease was signed in ballpoint pen on a counter that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and regret. The man who handed me the keys looked bored, the kind of tired that comes from watching too many people say they're starting over. I didn't correct him when he asked if my daughter would be helping me move in. I just said I'd manage. The place came with 2 chairs and a table pressed against the wall. I rearranged them slowly, pausing between movements. I kept one chair by the window, the other near the shelf, where I placed my books, most of them with cracked spines and notes in the margins. I touched each one before setting it down, as if reacquainting myself with something I hadn't spoken to in years. Colleen sent one message. We'll figure it out. No punctuation, no name. I folded the message in half and placed it in a drawer without reading it again. The first morning I walked to the market. I picked out a small box of chamomile tea, the kind with flowers still visible in the bag. It came in a yellow paper carton with the corners slightly crushed. I held it in my hand longer than I needed to. No one told me to get the stronger kind. No one asked if it would keep. I didn't compare prices. At the checkout, the cashier, a girl with chipped blue polish, scanned it without comment. I counted out exact change. Her nails clicked against the register as she closed the drawer. I boiled the water in a dented kettle I found on the discount shelf. It hissed unevenly, then whistled once like a polite reminder. I poured slowly, watching the steam curl up like something exhaled too gently to name. The first sip didn't taste like anything new. It tasted like permission. I unpacked my clothes, one piece at a time. Most of them carried the smell of a closet that hadn't been opened properly in years. I hung a pale cardigan by the door, the one with a loose thread near the hem. I left it there even after I noticed it brushing the floor when the breeze from the window moved the air around. There was a shelf above the small desk. I placed the photo of Howard there, him in a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled, holding a paintbrush midair, as if waiting for someone to laugh. I leaned the frame slightly forward so the reflection from the light wouldn't wash him out. His face looked more real in soft light. I told him without speaking that I was all right. The sink had two settings, lukewarm and boiling. I washed the dishes by hand, a chipped plate, a cup with a faded logo I couldn't read. The sponge smelled faintly of lemon, and I let the smell linger in the tips of my fingers longer than I should have. There was no television, just a radio I brought from the basement. The dial skipped slightly when I turned it. I found a station that played classical music in the evenings. The announcer never said her name, just track titles, weather, and brief pauses between symphonies. I left it on low, more hum than sound. I found a book on my shelf. I hadn't finished one I'd started in 1997, judging by the receipt I used as a bookmark. The pages were yellowed at the corners. I started again from the beginning. The words came back slowly, like old friends whose names take a moment to recall. No one knocked on the door. No one interrupted. I swept the floor with a short-handled broom and folded the rug edges flat with my foot. I cleaned the stove even though I hadn't used it yet. I polished the faucet until I could see the lines of my face in the reflection, though only faintly. My reflection had softened. I didn't hang anything on the walls. Not yet. I wasn't sure what would belong there. A neighbor passed by once and waved. I lifted my hand in return. We didn't speak. The curtains were too long. I hemmed them with safety pins and didn't tell anyone. I left the second chair empty. Not out of hope, just to see what the space looked like with room for someone else. In the evenings, I opened the window as far as it would go and sat with a warm cup in both hands. I didn't sip right away. I let the warmth fill the space between my palms. There were no sounds upstairs, no hallway footsteps, no overheard sentences meant for someone else. I didn't think about Darren, not out of anger, just because the silence no longer needed to explain itself. I had always believed in making space for others. I was learning now how to make space for myself. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't ask if I was allowed. Some voices only come back when they need something. The phone lit up just past midnight. I didn't keep the sound on anymore, but the glow of the screen was enough to wake me. The name appeared without a photo, just text, simple and spare. I watched it fade once, then blink again. I waited until the third call before answering. Her voice came quieter than I remembered. Not softer, just worn at the edges like something used too often without care. I sat up, wrapping the blanket tighter around my shoulders, Not because I was cold, but because it felt like the kind of call that required holding yourself in place. I know it's late. I didn't interrupt. I know I've never said it, but I should have listened earlier. Darren's not well. The job's gone. The investors are pulling out. He lost more than he told anyone. I heard the sound of breathing that wasn't steady. He's yelling at the kids, at me. He won't admit it, but he's sinking. There was a pause long enough for both of us to feel it. I'm not asking you to come back. Just to meet me, once. Please. The line went still after that. I didn't respond right away. I just set the phone back on the nightstand and stared at the faint shadow it left on the sheets. By morning, I knew where she'd asked to meet. There was a cafe downtown with cracked tiles and chipped mugs. They brewed the coffee too strong, and the chairs were always uneven. It was neutral territory, a place that didn't belong to either of us. Colleen arrived with her coat half-buttoned, the sleeves pushed up unevenly. She hadn't worn makeup. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked her hair behind her ears over and over again. She didn't order anything. He broke a plate yesterday. Not at anyone, just threw it. She looked down. Sophie didn't flinch. That's what scared me. I kept my fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic cup. It wasn't the tea I preferred, but I drank it anyway. I've never asked for anything from you, she continued. Maybe because I thought if I didn't, I'd never owe anything. Her voice dropped lower. But I don't know what to do now. He won't go to therapy. He won't talk to his friends, and I don't have anyone who can look him in the eye and still remind him who he used to be. I looked at the table. A sugar packet lay unopened near her hand. She didn't notice it slipping toward the edge. I know he said things to you, she went on. Things no one should say to their mother. I didn't nod. I didn't correct her. But I've been thinking about what that does to the kids. What it teaches them. That family is just whoever's easiest to use. Her hands were still now folded tightly in her lap. I want them to grow up seeing that when something breaks, you try to mend it. The sugar packet finally fell. She bent to pick it up, paused, then placed it back on the table without looking at me. Even if the tear was your fault, she added almost too low to hear. I didn't give her an answer. I didn't need to. She reached into her coat and took out a folded piece of paper. Sophie drew this. It's a school project. Family tree. She added your name this time. No one told her to. She slid it across the table like an offering. I looked at the rough pencil lines, the cramped handwriting spelling my name in all capital letters, misspelled slightly. It didn't matter. She wants to know if you'll come to her recital next month. The question hovered. She said she saved you a seat. I reached for the drawing, folded it slowly, and placed it into my bag. Not as acceptance, just so it wouldn't blow away. Colleen stood after a moment. I'm not asking you to fix him. I just want him to see what he's done. Maybe hearing it from you, it'll mean something. She hesitated at the door. You don't have to come for him, but maybe come for what's left. She didn't wait for a reply. The tea had gone cold. I drank what was left anyway. The bitterness was tolerable. Later that night, I sat at my small table with the drawing unfolded in front of me. The paper had creases now and a smudge near the corner where Colleen's fingers must have pressed too tightly. I smoothed it out, then let my hand rest in the middle of the page where my name had been written. No one had said I was missed. No one had apologized. But someone remembered I existed. And for now, that would be enough to hold in my hands quietly. Some doors don't creak when they open. They just release air you didn't know you were holding. I told Colleen I would come, but only for the children. Not to sit at the table as if everything had remained intact. I wasn't returning. I was visiting. I baked a small tin of lemon shortbread the night before. The smell reminded me of something simpler Saturday mornings with flour on the counter before voices got sharper and days more narrow. I wrapped the tin in parchment and tied it with a faded ribbon. I didn't expect anyone to notice the detail, but I needed it to feel complete. The house looked the same from the outside. Same uneven path, same creaking mailbox. But the weight of the key no longer sat in my purse. Colleen opened the door quickly, as if afraid I'd change my mind in the seconds it took her to undo the lock. The children hovered behind her half-smiles, unsure whether to hug or wave. I just held out the tin and let them decide. We sat in the kitchen. I was offered tea. I declined. I'd brought my own thermos. Colleen poured water for the children. No one spoke much. The youngest picked at the corner of the tablecloth. Sophie looked at me, then at the tin. "It smells like when we were little." I nodded. There was nothing to add. Colleen cleared her throat. "He's not home. He said he'd be out all afternoon. I just thought it would be good for them to see you here again." I folded my napkin once, then again. I didn't come to repair anything I said. I came because they still know my name. The oven clicked once in the background. The youngest asked if we could play cards later like we used to. Colleen smiled with only half her mouth. "Of course." She brought the old deck. "Didn't you, Dolores?" I reached into my bag and pulled it out. Creased box rubber band still holding it shut. I hadn't realized I'd kept it there until that moment. Then came the front door. Loud, fast. Shoes not even kicked off before the hallway was filled with steps. A familiar voice just loud enough to cut the air. "What the hell is this?" He walked into the kitchen and stopped when he saw me. "You brought her back." No one answered. This isn't some damn retirement home. She doesn't get to walk in here like she belongs. He looked thinner than before. The sharpness in his jaw had given way to something hollow. I looked at him, slowly, fully, then spoke, not loud, not soft. "If you're still using that voice to speak to me, then this will be the last time you ever hear mine." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Colleen moved slightly in her chair. The children stayed still. No one looked at him. They looked at me. I reached into my bag again, took out the envelope I had prepared. Thin but heavy in its meaning. I laid it on the table without a sound. "I don't want what you took," I said. "I don't need you to return anything. But you should know I took it back. Properly. Legally." I pushed the envelope forward with 2 fingers. "I am no longer someone you can erase." He looked at the envelope like it might burn him. No apology came. I didn't expect one. The room held a stillness I recognized, the kind that follows something broken but before anyone dares move. I stood slowly, smoothed the edge of my coat. My knees didn't creak as they used to. I hadn't noticed that until now. Colleen didn't say anything, but her hand rested gently on mine as I passed her. It didn't ask me to stay. Outside, the air didn't feel cold. It just felt real. Not filtered through obligation or regret. Just air. I walked back to my car without looking back. The tin was empty now, but the ribbons still sat in my pocket. Some people mistake silence for surrender. But sometimes silence is the only thing loud enough to be heard. The sound of a pen gliding across a form can be quieter than breath, but somehow it feels louder when the paper is legal. I sat across from Claire, who wore the same expression she did when Howard and I first walked into her office years ago, me with a manila folder, him with a handshake and a nervous cough. This time there were no folders, just a small notebook where I had written 4 sentences. I want everything placed under my name again. I want no claims made against it. I want no notices sent to their address. I want a scholarship fund created under the name May. Claire read them twice and didn't ask why. The next morning, I sorted through the box at the back of my closet. The one with greeting cards, faded school drawings, and envelopes that still smelled faintly of pine, holiday photos where everyone smiled a little too perfectly. I ran my fingers over the glossy paper, recognizing poses that had been orchestrated like furniture in a catalog. I tore them gently down the center. No anger, just release. There was one envelope I didn't touch right away. My name was written in gold ink, swirled in calligraphy, Mrs. Dolores Whitaker. I turned it over, pressed it flat, then reached for the small form I had filled out the day before. A new name, an old one. I mailed the petition that afternoon, Dolores May Holloway. When the confirmation arrived 2 weeks later, I tucked the paper into the inside pocket of my coat. It stayed there close to the lining, pressed against my ribs, like a quiet vow no one needed to witness. A few days after that, I received a message through Colleen. Darren wanted to meet. Not at the house, not at my apartment. He suggested the park. Neutral ground. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat on a bench near the pond, the one where mallards gathered in the mornings, slipping like small boats between reeds. He came without the children, without a jacket, hands in his pockets, shoulders uneven. He didn't sit at first, just looked down at the gravel. "I didn't think you'd come," he said eventually, voice caught between caution and fatigue. I said nothing. He sat beside me, not close, not far. The space between us held everything we hadn't said in years. "I've made a mess, more than I thought possible." He breathed in like he meant to say more, but let the air go instead. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he added. "That would be stupid." I looked at the lake. A petal floated by on the surface. Yellow, half folded. "You're not the same anymore," he said after a long pause. "And I don't have anywhere else to hide from what I've become." I didn't answer. A boy in a red jacket ran by, laughing, his father behind him, pretending to be a monster. The boy screamed with joy, oblivious to how the world could harden later. Darren leaned forward, elbows on knees. "If I wanted to try again, would you even believe it?" I shifted in my seat. "I'm not the one who needs to believe I said." "Colleen still has room in her voice when she speaks to you. You should start there." He didn't look at me, just nodded once. "I thought strength meant pushing everyone else out," he murmured. "Now I sit in the house and wonder why it's so quiet." I took a slow breath, the kind that doesn't fill your lungs, just steadies your spine. "You mistook silence for peace," I said. "They're not the same." A leaf scraped against the sidewalk. A distant dog barked once and was answered. He stood up eventually, brushed the dirt from his jeans. "Didn't offer a hug." "I wouldn't have taken it. I won't bother you again," he said. "But if I ever become someone worth knowing, I hope you'll hear it from someone else, not me." I let the words pass. Not to forgive, not to deny, just to let them be words. He walked away with slower steps than he came. When he was out of view, I reached into my coat and touched the folded edge of the name change form still tucked inside. There are things a mother can't repair, but she can stop holding the pieces. The wind brushed past the bench, carrying a scent I couldn't place. I watched the petal until it disappeared into the center of the lake. Not every cut needs a scar. Some just need to stop bleeding. In silence, something good began to root. I don't remember the last time I felt the need to explain myself. Maybe that's what peace looks like when the urge to be understood loosens its grip. My mornings begin with the sound of the kettle. Not rushed, not demanded. The same white porcelain mug chipped near the handle sits ready. The steam curls softly. I let it rise. I no longer wait for anyone else's cup to be filled. The house is small, just a square of walls and light. The wooden chair creaks when I shift the cushion, slightly faded in the middle. I stitched that patch myself, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There's a kind of dignity in the quiet care of small things. My name is mine again, Dolores May Holloway. It's printed on a new library card, embossed on the lease, written in firm black ink on a will that names no one out of obligation. When the documents were signed, the lawyer looked at me. "You're sure?" I didn't answer. I only nodded and ran my thumb over the corner of the page, like smoothing out a wrinkle that wasn't really there. The money is under my name. The house I left behind has long since lost my scent. I suppose it's better that way. Darren and Colleen live in a rental, now small brown 2 bedrooms. I haven't seen the inside. I don't ask. They don't offer. I heard Darren works in municipal records. Not a title that fits well into the kind of pride he used to carry, but perhaps it's a weight he needed. No suits, no spreadsheets, just maps, property lines, and silence. A man cannot yell at a plat map. Colleen brings the children by every second Sunday. Sophie is taller now. Her shoes squeak less on my kitchen tiles. She still hugs with her whole arms like the child inside her hasn't yet learned the adult fear of needing someone. I hold her back just as tightly. They never stay long, but they never leave in a rush. Last Christmas, an envelope arrived. Handwritten. Darren's penmanship still crooked, still uncertain. If you still have any thread of patience left, I'd like to learn how to be better. I don't need you to fix me. Just watch me try. I didn't reply. I placed the letter in the drawer beside my bed next to the old tea tin and the brooch my mother once wore. A week later, I mailed a soft leather notebook with a card inside. Start with what you were never brave enough to say out loud. He never said thank you. He didn't need to. We sat across from each other last month on a wooden bench in the park near the old Methodist church. Sophie was playing in the distance. Darren's jacket sleeves were fraying. He didn't speak for a long time. Then I guess I have to start over. I just don't know where over begins. I didn't give him an answer. The breeze was answer enough. In this little house, I've started painting again. Just watercolors. I keep them clipped to a clothesline I strung above the kitchen window. I'm not good. That's not the point. Some days I draw just the inside of a walnut shell or the curve of a leaf I found in the community garden. No one claps. No one critiques. That's the gift. The community garden is 4 lots down. Lavender in the front bed, rosemary in the back. I planted chives last month. They haven't come up yet. The woman who waters the plot beside mine told me they're slow. She smiled like someone who knew that things worth having always are. On Tuesday and Thursday mornings, I volunteer at the library. Reading lessons. Mostly to adults. Last week, a man in his 50s finally read a full page without pausing. He grinned at the last sentence and said, "I never thought I'd be able to say that out loud." I nodded and pushed the next page toward him. My phone doesn't ring much. I don't mind. The absence of noise is not the absence of life. Some days I sit and listen to the wooden clock tick and think about how often I used to fill silences with tasks as if stillness had to be earned. Claire, the lawyer, sends the annual paperwork reminders. You're all set. Unless you've changed your mind about anything. I haven't. I won't. My will is clear. Will is everything that remains of me, what I owned, what I chose, goes to the scholarship fund in Sophie and Theo's names. Not Darren's, not Colleen's, just the children. Because they are still becoming, and that deserves protection. I sometimes wonder what Howard would say about all of this. Not the conflict. He wouldn't have tolerated that. But the house, the painting, the silence. I think he'd sit beside me, sip the chamomile, and nod once like he used to when words would have ruined the moment. Yesterday I baked scones. Not for a party, not for guests, just because the oven was warm and the kitchen smelled too clean. I set them on a tray and brought them to the porch. Colleen and the children arrived not long after. Sophie ran up the steps and leaned her head into my chest. Theo stood back unsure until I reached out my hand. He took it. Colleen looked older, but not broken. She said, "They missed you, and I've learned to listen better." I poured tea. I didn't correct her. Darren stayed by the car. He didn't wave. But when he caught my eye, he gave a small nod. Not a plea, not guilt, just a recognition. I nodded back. That was enough. When they left, the house held their warmth for a few minutes longer. I carried the empty tray back inside. The chair by the window waited without judgment. The canvas on my easel is still unfinished. A single tree stands in the middle of it, its roots stretching downward into dry earth, its branches breaking into bloom. The title I penciled in the corner, "Quiet but Still Becoming." And I suppose that's the truest thing I've ever painted.